Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on where you are. Today I'm going to read for about an hour from my favourite newspapers. That's it, we're on. Confirmation. So would you believe it, but Henry Kissinger is 100 years old. I actually thought he was already dead. So, go figure. He's got a complicated legacy, I'd say. But now he is a centenarian, famous for his groundbreaking secret trip to China in 1971. He's now worried about a confrontation between the superpowers, which is a bit rich, if you ask me, because he is the one that kept the Vietnam War going for longer than it needed to go, which was probably an even more serious confrontation between the superpowers than the one we are seeing today. Shoe was another foot back then. Must make it different. Observers say the statement's continued popularity in Beijing underscores importance attached to ties with Washington in spite of global rivalry. Henry Kissinger remains fixated on China more than 50 years after his secret groundbreaking trip to Beijing in 1971. Unlike half a century ago when he triangulated Beijing against Moscow with the reopening of direct diplomacy, tilting the Cold War balance of power, the former US Secretary of State is now worried about a superpower war with Beijing. Well, I don't really rate Henry Kissinger all that highly, to tell you the truth. But 100's a good innings. And, for entertainment, if you want to see things that are wrong, let's go and have a look at Henry Kissinger's memos to President who was working with LBJ during the Vietnam War. Goodness me. Anyway, he last visited China in November. Kissinger last visited China in November 2019, soon before the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Chinese President Xi Jinping hailed Kissinger's historic contribution to bilateral ties and his profound historical insights and deep understanding of traditional Chinese culture. Really. That was the beginning of a large number of changes for China, 1971. I think they wrestled the permanent UN Security Council seat from Taiwan shortly after. It might have been 72 or 73. It was the beginning of a normalization with China, which led to a number of good things, but I don't know if I want to hear about them from Henry Kissinger, to tell you the truth. Channel News Asia from Singapore. It's a great little outlet. Chinese aircraft carrier passes through Taiwan Strait. It's the Chinese aircraft carrier Shandong, apparently, transiting the strait yesterday, Saturday, May 27, in which an expert said was an unusual display of Beijing's military might during a prolonged period of tensions. Excuse me just for a second. I'm going to make this text bigger. I think we could probably stand for it to be slightly larger. 3 Chinese ships, including the Shandong aircraft carrier, sailed through the Taiwan Strait. Well, it's allowed. So, of course, China claims the self-ruled democratic Taiwan as its territory and has vowed to take it back one day by force if necessary. And I think, honestly, that remains to be seen. Let's see. Since Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen, who rejected that the island is part of China, was elected in 2016, Beijing has ramped up air and sea incursions around the island. The presence of Chinese warships is constantly monitored and announced near daily by Taipei, but an aircraft carrier passing through the 180-kilometre wide Taiwan Strait has not been seen since March 2022. It's an interesting story. Nothing new, though. They've done it before. They've done things that are arguably more provocative by, crossing over that centre line that both sides seem to respect. What else is going on? Oh, I was looking at this story yesterday. The man who opened the Asiana plane door says he felt suffocated and wanted out quickly. It's something I looked at extensively yesterday. So this aeroplane is landing on a domestic flight from Jeju Island, landing, I think, in Daegu on Friday, Seoul time on Friday, perhaps at 200 or 250 metres above ground, decides to open the door. And, we've all seen the video of people being buffeted by the winds. Those two blokes at the front of the plane did rather well. They were keeping it together. They must have been well and truly worried about that. The man in his 30s has been taken into custody and told officers he had been under stress after losing a job recently. I wonder why he lost his job. Maybe they should ask that. And for a while I was thinking the Koreans aren't going to say anything about this because there's obviously something up with this bloke. Well, there he is, and he was a bit nervous. But it still doesn't explain how the door opened. Not meant to happen. I think that's pretty widely agreed. We've all flown before and we've had that, cabin crew cross-check thing, which deactivates the slides when you've landed and you pull up against the, the terminal and passengers are about to alight. When the door opens, if they hadn't de-armed the slides, they'd pop out and cause a mess. But there is just no way that those doors, if operating properly, should have opened like that. That door would have taken a fair bit of effort too, I think. So people taken to hospital. It's not really a big deal, actually, that whole story. Now, I did see something in here which would be interesting to compare and contrast to the South China Morning Post story. So here we are. The Civic Party in Hong Kong, it's a pro-democracy party. It has disbanded because nobody wants to be the leader. Because to be the leader of the Civic Party in Hong Kong would mean you're going to go to jail under the new national security law passed by the Chinese in 2020, I think it was. Nicknamed the Barristers Party, it was founded in 2006 by professional elites, mostly from the legal sector, who wanted to promote democratisation and civil society in Hong Kong, which back then was perfectly fine. Now let's just have a look and see how it's been covered in Hong Kong itself. Okay, keep on reading. Sort of story number, I go a fair way down, story number 10. The organisation decides to wind up. Ooh, my subscription here is a bit wonky. I'm going to have to get in and actually pay for it. Goodness me. The organisation decides to wind up after failing to find any members willing to serve as chairman. Co-founder Ronnie Tong says the party long ago deviated from its mission of providing centrist candidates and policies. Okay. So the South China Morning Post is saying, the party's lost its way. It's just, it's become too radical. Really. So it was once the second largest of the opposition parties, has disbanded after 17 years, with its chairman urging residents to remain hopeful, live in truth, and believe in tomorrow. So I just wonder, the organisation just decided to wind itself up, like a company that had already served its purpose, after all but one of its 31 members voted for the motion to dissolve at an extraordinary general meeting on Saturday. Okay, so far we've not even mentioned the laws which prevent these democratic parties from operating. So we're how far in now? We're into the fifth paragraph here, and still no mention. Leong said that the fate of the party was sealed when no members came forward to run for chairman, leaving it without leadership successors who could organise fundraising. Yeah, leaving it without leadership successors who could remain outside of prison might be a better way of putting it. But I'm just intrigued to see how long we're going to go for in this article without even mentioning. This is the South China Morning Post, people, and they're not even talking about this. Party championed the cause of universal suffrage and the rule of law. While the Civic Party has not accomplished the work we set out to do, there is a time for everything, he wrote in his chairman's report. This is Mr. Leong. I don't blame him, actually. The world is ever changing. History will tell. Meanwhile, we're all going to migrate somewhere else. I think that's the subtext here, people. Oh, the future of the party became uncertain when Beijing imposed the national security law on Hong Kong in 2020, targeting acts of secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces, allowing the anti-government protests, following the anti-government protests the year before. That's an extraordinary sentence, actually. Go on about it that much, but it's been uncertain. It's just uncertain, like not sure if it's going to rain today. Something. Okay. On and on we go. Okay, well that's really interesting. Now, am I right in thinking that SCMP owner is Jack Ma? Am I right? Yep, owned by Alibaba at least. Hang on, I want to see that. South China Morning Post, with its Sunday edition, the Sunday Morning Post, is a Hong Kong-based English language newspaper owned by Alibaba Group. Well, mate, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be subscribing. Ouch. I wonder if it makes any money. Have a quick look at this. Not that it looks like it's been cleaned up. Oh God, this is a newspaper that's been going on for, what is it, over 100 years? Yeah, it's founded on the 6th of November 1903. And, circulation's pretty respectable. 105,000, 17,000 digital. That's a bit odd. You'd think that Hong Kong there'd be a huge uptake of the digital side of it. Okay, Hong Kong the Hong Kong Free Press. Why I will no longer write for the South China Morning Post. By Stephen Vines. I don't know who Stephen Vines is from a bar of soap, but I think he's having a bit of a one of those shit cracks when you're on the way out. Gormin Hay. He's one of these blokes. He's in. Yeah, it's just terrible. Won't go on about that. you'll get the picture. Wow, I'm crossing this thing off my list. I think I'll probably, just delete that thing. You might say that Channel News Asia has similar problems. I don't think so. I mean, people go on a bit about censorship and whatnot in Singapore, but, well, I don't see it. I mean, certainly not when it comes to international news. I think they're a rather well-informed group of people there, actually. Here we go. This is interesting. The clash of laws. Singapore notoriously anti-drugs. And Thailand, not so much. Cannabis-flavoured gummies, CBD massages in Thailand. Why Singaporean visitors must beware. Yeah, good advice, because you don't want to end up going home and getting a, drug test and then spending the next couple of years in court or worse. Thailand's changed, hasn't it? I mean, I'm not sure what to make of it, actually. I haven't been there since the laws changed. So the kingdom removed cannabis from its list of controlled drugs last June. So since then, shops peddling all manner of cannabis-related products have come shooting out like mushrooms, in the words of CNA's Thailand correspondent Saksit Sayasumbut. I hope I got that right. By some estimates, about 5,000 cannabis businesses have sprouted up across the country, 1,000 of them in Bangkok alone, he told the program Talking Point, in an episode about how Singaporeans could avoid falling foul of Singapore's laws whilst abroad. Yeah, I don't think they've got a sense of humour on this. Dispensaries stocking different strains of cannabis, also known as marijuana, ganja and weed. It's not the full extent of the nicknames for it, but, get the picture. They're with it, with the hip lingo all the kids are using these days. I just find this a bit extraordinary that things in Thailand could have changed so much, because even possession would have got you prison in the time I was there. So lots of dispensaries. Singaporeans, you don't worry about this kind of shit. As long as you don't have it in your pocket when you're going back through customs, you're fine. But still, my opinion, not a very good idea. Sounds like the Thais have probably figured out a way of taxing this. Don't really care to look into it. But I shall hunt on. Malaysia holds its biggest international arms exhibition as it looks to update old defence systems. About $4 billion worth of deals were done during the 5-day exhibition. Interesting. Malaysia. What do we got there? South Korean Black Eagles. Langkawi. Oh, yeah, righto. The Langkawi International Maritime and Aerospace Exhibition is by far the country's largest, with over 500 companies from about 30 countries showcasing their latest technologies in both hardware and software. What's the key point here? That's interesting. Malaysia is buying FA-50 fighters from South Korea. I think that's a development, but wow. Okay, let's move on from Asia. Back to Australia. What do we got here? Yeah, this whole thing here. Brittany Higgins. I don't want to go into it. It's all kinds of suppression orders in place here still, I think. Where I live. Ooh, heartbreak high stuck turned drug dealer. Always a interesting when some kid falls from grace like this. Pleaded guilty to commercial cocaine supply. He's planning to move to Bali just before his arrest. You know, what is it with Bali and drugs? A couple once told me that drugs were imported into Bali. I mean, obviously, if you look at this whole Chappelle Corby situation, there was drugs being imported into Bali, presumably to be sent somewhere else. But you'd think that the market was, fairly limited on Bali because of the strict sentences. Must be all the tourists. So here he is. I never heard of the guy. His name is Putu Winchester Stanton. Jesus. Who calls their kid Putu? What a complete moron. Lives in Mullumbimby, kind of, what do you expect? Natalie McCann. Oh, there's a good one here. Here we go. Jarryd Hayne is sharing a prison cell with convicted Manly young gun Manasseh Fainu. Is that how you say his name? Don't really care. But there he is. I've got to kill this thing. There's some ad down here. Off you go. So, disgraced NRL star Jarryd Hayne has been put in a cell with another National Rugby League footballer. He's doing another 3 years for being found guilty of sexual assault. It's a pretty complicated case. He's been in, he's been out, he's back in again. It's complex, but I recall reading stories about how he was hated the last time he was in jail because he thought he was special. I bet he still does. Let's pop this one out a bit. Oops. Too far. So he's going to allow these two morons to watch the football together in their cell. I mean, terrific. What a good news story that is. Wonder if there's any evidence of good behaviour. Nah, that's him. And what did this guy do? Oh, just been stabbed to 8 years in December last year for stabbing a youth leader in a violent brawl outside a Mormon church dance in 2019. Guess that could happen to anybody, right? I'm glad they're, getting on well and able to keep up their interest in football whilst being punished. It's all just very sordid. It's not really worth going into. The Daily Mail's a joke, by the way. So what does the Weekend Australian have to say? Sad story there about some woman who's been diagnosed with MS at the age of 25. Horrible. Here's an interesting story. Joe Biden hopeful of US debt resolution within hours. Okay. Well, that was written a few hours ago, and there's no debt resolution. That's written, by my reckoning, about 23 hours ago, and as far as I'm aware, there is no resolution. So let's leave that one and go to CNN. We'll get rid of the Daily Mail. So the Turkish election is on later today, Sunday, Turkey time, Give them time. I think they'll probably be up and at it in about 8 or 10 hours. That will be a very interesting outcome, the runoff with just two of them. I think that the debt story is, where's the debt story? Let's go to the US. People talking about the Ukraine counter-offensive being imminent. Yeah, well, they've been saying that for weeks. I don't see it happening at the moment. But, okay, well, what the hell's going on here? I got nothing. Let's go to the Hill. That's a fantastic... no, I haven't really done this very well. The Hill. They'll have something, I would be sure. Well, the Hill's said to be more sort of right of CNN. I don't see it being a centre-right type of publication, but here's its take. Kevin McCarthy. I'm just going to pop this one up a bit. Kevin McCarthy said on Saturday that Congress will meet the deadline to raise the debt ceiling, acknowledging that no deal has been made, but vowing an agreement will be reached in time to prevent a government default. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen raised the stakes in the marathon negotiations on Friday when she provided the first hard deadline for when the government would be unable to pay all of its obligations. That is June 5. I don't think he cares. And if he did care, then his threat to force a default is empty, right? Asked if Congress can meet that deadline, McCarthy didn't hesitate. Yes, he said, shortly after arriving at the Capitol on Saturday for another round of talks. Doesn't really mean he's going to agree to everything by then. It just means they're going to meet, right? Who knows what they'll do? McCarthy vowed that he'll stick with the 72-hour rule, providing lawmakers with a full 3 days to read the text of legislation before they are asked to vote on it, and said that he's been in talks with Senate leaders about how much time they'll need to ensure the 5 June deadline is met. Everybody won't like what is the end of... What the hell is this? Everybody won't like... What? Everybody won't like what is the end of the agreement. Everybody won't like what is the end of the agreement. Okay, on both sides. Nobody will like what is at the end of the agreement. Neither side. Anyway, I'm not going to rewrite his fucking speech for him, but his comments for him. It doesn't seem to me like anything serious is going on there. They'll run that down to the wire. That will be very interesting, actually, very interesting because, surely deep down he doesn't really want a default, but, he probably wants less spending in quite a big hurry. Yeah, okay. Well, that's not really much of a development at all. Texas House votes to impeach Attorney General Ken Paxton. What's that all about? Do we care? Don't know. So here's some news from Reuters, which, I rate very highly. Let me just pop this up a bit. Kevin McCarthy saying here that they had a phone conversation on Saturday evening. This must be quite recent because Saturday evening is now, about the ongoing debt ceiling negotiations. Yeah. two are expected to start speaking at 6 p.m. EDT. What time is it right now in Washington? Let me look it up. 6:26 p.m. Okay. McCarthy said earlier on Saturday that he was making progress in negotiations on raising the federal government's debt ceiling as the nation faced risk of default in a little more than a week. However, just ahead of the expected call between Biden and McCarthy, Republican deal negotiator Patrick McHenry told reporters major disagreement remained between his party and Biden's Democrats. That seems like what is actually happening. Let's go back. Erdogan doing his final bit of campaigning for the, these pop-ups. Can I kill these pop-ups? That's an interesting question. The first round showed Erdogan with the lead over opposition candidate. Candidates vie to attract 8 million who didn't vote in first round. Polls in presidential runoff open at 5 o'clock GMT and close at 1400 now. All right, so the polls are opening in about 7 hours. Interesting. Really far-reaching consequences from the outcome of this election. Come back to that later on tonight, I think. It's around for a little bit more. One thing we haven't looked at is the BBC. They're covering the Turkey story. Hundreds of expelled Germans to leave Russia. Some tit-for-tat expulsions going on there. Hundreds of Germans working in the education and cultural sectors will be expelled from Russia next month, the German Foreign Ministry says. They included teachers at the German school in Moscow and staff at the Goethe Institute Cultural Association. It's terrible. But this is all part of tit-for-tat expulsions, diplomats, and increasingly strained relations between Russia and Germany. Last month, Russia and Germany each declared 40 employees of their respective embassies persona non grata, or unwelcome, and expelled them. Interesting. Keep a watch on that one. What have we got in terms of world news? Turkey, we're ready to begin the counteroffensive cells, says Ukraine. Twitter is pulling out of a voluntary EU fake news code. Interesting. Elon Musk doesn't like the code. Twitter has pulled out of the EU voluntary code to fight disinformation, the EU said. Thierry Breton, who is the EU's Internal Market Commissioner, announced the news on Twitter, but warned that the firm new laws would force compliance. But warned Twitter the new laws would force compliance. Obligations remain. You can run, but you can't hide, he said. Twitter will be legally required to fight disinformation in the EU from 25 August, he said, adding, our teams will be ready for enforcement. Bit of a